One of the unsung heroes in watchmaking is the oil that keeps everything lubricated and moving forward. A watch runs all day and all night, hopefully 365 days a year. And with all of that friction, if we don't have the most advanced oils, our watches will wear out relatively fast. This is why we have to clean watches by completely disassembling them, running them through ultrasonic cleaning tanks, and then reassembling them, applying fresh oil. It's basically rebuilding the entire watch, kind of like an automobile restoration, except we have to do it every 3 to 5 years for watches that are worn regularly. With modern watches, we now have the availability of fully synthetic oils. In the past, oils would degrade far more rapidly than they do today. They were made of things like whale blubber. And not only would they smell, but they would wear out and the properties would change pretty quickly. Just like in an automobile, you'll get more miles for a fully synthetic oil than you would for a conventional oil. There's one company that produces almost all of the watch lubricant, and that company is Mobius. Mobius is a Swiss company owned by the Swatch Group, and they produce this specialized, fully synthetic watch oil that I believe the entire watch industry uses, even when we consider that this is a completely outdated method of keeping time, completely obsolete objects. But there is a state-of-the-art lubrication, manufacturing, and engineering company that the Swatch Group keeps running just for us watchmakers to make mechanical watches. Before we can do any oiling, we need to make sure that those jewel surfaces are completely clean and free of any dust, old oil residue, or any wear marks that might cause that oil to be pulled away from the place where we want it to stay. A good example as to why watches need to be regularly cleaned is looking at an old watch part. We will see the oil has caked onto the jewels or the pivots, and we can't even easily clean it off. So what we'll do is we'll take wooden sticks and we sharpen the ends of them and actually scrape the old oil off of the jewels. If the oil is hard enough that we have to scrape it off with a wooden toothpick, that's a bad thing for the watch. That means that the pivots have been running on what is essentially polishing paste, and it's been wearing down parts. You can even wear down the jewels inside of a watch. If that paste becomes abrasive enough and the watch continues running, the jewel holes that were round when they were made will become oval. The wheels inside of that jewel are being pushed to one side of the jewel while they run because the power in the gear train is coming from one direction. So you'll have a lot of wear on one side of the jewel hole. In order to clean this old oil off, we will take those watch parts and stick them in little cleaning trays once we've disassembled everything. We'll run it through a special Watchmaker's ultrasonic cleaning system, and then into a drying station, and this will all happen automatically in order to remove, rinse, and then clean and dry those parts so that when they come out, hopefully all of that old oil has been removed, and any other grime or fingerprints or oils, dusts, things like that have been removed, and we can start to reassemble with fresh oil. The oil in a watch doesn't go on everything. We're very particular about where that oil goes. There are some components that should not have any oil on them. If any watch oil was to get onto the hairspring of a watch, the hairspring would stick. The coils would begin to stick to each other. As the hairspring grows and shrinks, the coils would touch each other and stick. And this will cause the watch to not keep accurate time. So again, we want to make sure everything is perfectly clean and we don't get any oil onto any part that shouldn't have it. When we reassemble the movement, we place tiny little droplets of oil exactly where we want them to be. And the oil is placed on highly polished surfaces, like jewels or pivots. These are mirror polished pivots, and these are jewels made of sapphire crystals. So if you can imagine a water bead on a very clean piece of glass, where the bead holds together and does not disperse, if you put that same drop of water on a dirty piece of glass, the water would run away everywhere, following the pieces of dust, and it would break apart and spread out. So we need absolute cleanliness on those jewels and on those pivots so that the oil that we place stays exactly where we want it. In order to place the oil right where we want it, we use tiny little needle-like oilers. It has a little bit of a spade shape on the end that we can actually shape ourselves and polish ourselves so that it'll grab just the right amount of oil that we want to. We can dip the oiler end into our lubrication here and then apply it right where we want to. We're just gonna transfer it from here onto the jewel of a watch or onto the pivot of a watch, and then we clean it in a soft pithwood. Running from the barrel down to the escapement of a watch, the amount of torque decreases with every wheel. So the slow-moving, high-torque wheels get a slightly thicker oil than the low-torque, quickly moving wheels. And then finally, when you get down to the pallet fork, there's no oil on the pallet fork pivots. And that's because even the lightest oil that is made is too thick and too heavy for the pallet fork to move back and forth properly. So even a thin oil in the wrong place will keep your watch from running properly. There's also a very special oil that is on the pallet fork jewels. And this oil actually hardens when there's no movement. And that's so a glob of oil will stay on the tip of the pallet jewel, and it will only soften and become liquid when it touches the escape wheel tooth. So only upon contact and movement will that oil become thinner and lubricate the surface. And as soon as it's not touching the tooth of the escape wheel, it hardens again so that it doesn't spread or be flung through the movement with the fast spinning of the escape wheel. There's some other parts inside of the winding and setting mechanism that have a lot of friction, and these steel parts, maybe when you pull your crown out and you hear or feel that clicking noise, when you engage the time setting, that clicking noise, there are parts inside of the watch that are moving with lots of friction for a short period of time. On those, we use a special grease. I actually use a hydraulic grease The reason I do that is because it contains lead. It lasts a little bit longer. It reduces the friction even more than the watchmaking equivalent. But it's not something that is manufactured in Switzerland. It's something that's actually made here in the US. With fully synthetic oils, the oil will last up to 10 years under ideal circumstances. And ideal circumstances don't totally align with a wristwatch. Ideal circumstances for these oils is a set temperature, usually around 60 degrees, 50 degrees. Our wrist is 98 degrees, and maybe you're in the sun or in the heat. So typically the wrist is warmer than these oils were initially designed for. So 10 years is ideal. However, once the oil is in the watch, we only expect to get 3 to 5 years of use from that oil, because watches have more torque than they need, so they can usually overpower oil that's drying out or becoming dirty. So you might not see a problem with your watch, but it will slowly start to wear out pivots and jewels and points of contact where there's high friction and the oil has broken down. So when we talk about the ideal circumstances for that oil to last as long as 10 years, we're talking about this oil here, which is kept in a refrigerator, stored inside of this metal tin, inside of this little vial. This will not see sunlight. This will not see temperature changes very regularly. It will only see temperature changes when I take a little bit out of here to place into my oil cups, which I then use the oiler to oil watches. And that will be replaced weekly. So this will only come out of the refrigerator once a week. And I will likely use this up before 10 years. With every watch, there are technical diagrams from the manufacturer of the movement. And those technical diagrams or technical documents show their recommended oiling. It will tell watchmakers exactly where to put what types of oil and how much. It's a guideline, and some watchmakers will follow them exactly, and some watchmakers will come up with their own way of oiling certain movements based on how many times they may have seen issues with certain parts. The oiling of wristwatches is completely necessary. A watch will not run without oil, and it will not keep accurate time without oil on those pallet fork jewels. As soon as that oil starts to degrade on those jewels, we start to have the possibility of timing errors. Today, there's a lot of watchmakers trying to eliminate the use of oil completely, because if you can eliminate the use of oil, then you don't have to clean and re-oil every 3 to 5 years. We're still not totally there with a perfect solution for oilless watches. That's probably many years out, but there are a few makers that have their own unique designs of escapements and their own choice of materials that are better than the typical Swiss lever, pallet fork, and escape wheel. Watches run all day and all night. Unlike our automobiles that we park and we turn off, the wristwatch continues running while we sleep. It's always running. And how it does that is with some amazing, fully synthetic oils. So next time you look at your wrist and you see the second hand sweeping around, you can think about all the engineering and all the care that went into cleaning and assembling your watch, placing that oil exactly where it needs to be so that it stays there for at least the next 3 to 5 years, no matter what the watch goes through.